The whispers began the moment Hazel Thompson walked into White River, Montana, carrying nothing but a worn carpet bag and the weight of 3 dead husbands on her soul. She had not meant to come here, to this dusty frontier town perched along the Missouri River where the mountains met the plains, but desperation had a way of guiding feet when hope failed. The year was 1881, and for a woman alone with no family and a reputation that preceded her like a funeral march, options were scarce as spring rain in August. Her boots touched the wooden planks of Main Street, and she felt the eyes on her immediately, dozens of them, watching from behind curtains and over saloon doors. Word traveled faster than telegraph lines in small towns, and somehow these people already knew. They always knew. She was 24 years old, though the last 3 years had aged her in ways that had nothing to do with lines on her face. Her auburn hair, usually kept in a simple bun at the nape of her neck, caught the afternoon sun as she made her way toward the boarding house. Her dress, though clean and mended, showed its age in the faded blue fabric and twice turned hem. She held her head high despite the stares, despite the way conversations stopped as she passed, despite the woman who quite literally pulled her child behind her skirts as though death itself might be contagious. The boarding house proprietor, a rail, thin woman named Mrs. Caldwell with a pinched face and suspicious eyes, looked Hazel up and down twice before speaking. "We have a room," she said slowly, as if the words cost her something. $2 a week, paid in advance. No visitors after 8, no cooking in the rooms. Hazel counted out the coins from her small purse, watching her meager savings dwindle. "I am looking for work as well. I can sew, cook, clean. I can read and write and do figures." Mrs. Caldwell's expression did not change. "You are that woman, the one from the newspaper, the widow woman." She said the word widow like it was something foul. "I am a widow, yes," Hazel said quietly, meeting the woman's gaze without flinching. 3 times over through no fault or desire of my own. 3 husbands dead before 30. That is not natural. That is not right, Mrs. Caldwell slid a key across the counter. "Room 6. Upstairs, end of the hall. I will thank you to keep to yourself and not bring trouble to this establishment." The room was small and sparse, containing a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single window that looked out over the alley. Hazel set down her bag and sat on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap, and allowed herself exactly 5 minutes to feel the full weight of her circumstances. Then she stood, washed her face in the basin, and went back out to find work. The general store did not want her. The dressmaker took one look and shut the door in her face. The restaurant owner listened to her qualifications and said he would think about it, which they both knew meant no. By the time the sun began to sink behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Hazel had been rejected by every establishment on Main Street. She stood in front of the Mercantile, watching families pass by, mothers clutching their husbands' arms, children laughing and playing in the street, and felt the familiar ache of loneliness that had become her constant companion. "You are blocking the doorway, madam," a voice said behind her, deep and polite. Hazel turned and found herself looking up at a man who stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to block out the sunset. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of creek water, green-gray and clear. His face was sun-weathered, marked with a thin scar along his jawline, and his clothes spoke of hard work and honest living. Worn denim pants, a work shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, and a brown vest that had seen better days. A hat hung down his back on a cord, and his boots were dusty from the trail. "I apologize," Hazel said, stepping aside quickly. I was not paying attention. He tipped his head in acknowledgement and moved past her into the store, and she thought that was the end of it. But when she started walking back toward the boarding house, her shoulders slumped with defeat, she heard his voice again. "Excuse me, madam," she turned. He had followed her out, carrying a small bag of supplies. Up close, she noticed the kindness in his eyes, something that seemed out of place in a town that had shown her nothing but suspicion all day. "I could not help but overhear you asking Mr. Patterson about work," he said. "Are you new to White River?" "I arrived today," Hazel said carefully. "I am looking for employment, but it seems the town has no need of my skills." "What kind of work are you seeking?" "Anything honest. I can cook, sew, clean, tend animals. I worked as a school teacher for a brief time in Kansas. I can manage household accounts and preserve food. I am not afraid of hard work." He studied her for a moment, not with the suspicious, judging look she had received all day, but with genuine consideration. "My name is Zachary Owens," he said. "I run a cattle ranch about 5 miles north of town. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, has been wanting help for some time now. The ranch is large and she cannot manage all the cooking and cleaning herself. Would you be interested in such work?" Hope flickered in Hazel's chest, small and fragile. "I would be very interested, Mr. Owens. When might I meet Mrs. Chen to discuss the position?" "I am heading back to the ranch now. If you do not mind a wagon ride, you could come with me and see the place. If it suits you, and if Mrs. Chen agrees, you could start tomorrow." He paused, then added, "I should tell you the work is hard and the hours long, but the pay is fair and you would have room and board if you wanted it." Every instinct told Hazel to accept, but honesty compelled her to speak. "Mr. Owens, I should tell you something before you make this offer. The people in this town, they have already judged me. They believe I am cursed." "Cursed," he repeated, his tone neutral. "I have been married 3 times. All 3 husbands died. It was not my doing, but people talk. They say I bring death. They say I am dangerous." She lifted her chin. "I am telling you this because if you hire me, people will talk about you too. They will say you are foolish. They may not want to do business with you." Zachary Owens was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Then he said, "How did they die, your husbands?" The question was direct but not unkind. Hazel took a breath. "The first was Thomas Thompson. We married when I was 18. He died 6 months later when his wagon overturned on a mountain pass. We were traveling from Ohio to Kansas. The second was William Morrison. I married him 2 years later in Kansas. He died of cholera during an outbreak that killed 30 people in our town. The third was Robert Hayes. We married 1 year ago. He died when his horse threw him and he struck his head on a rock." "Accidents and illness," Zachary said. "None of it sounds like a curse to me. It sounds like the harsh realities of life on the frontier." Tears pricked at Hazel's eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. No one had said anything like that to her. Everyone else had looked at the pattern and seen supernatural malevolence instead of terrible luck. "The people of White River have already decided what they believe," she said quietly. "They will not change their minds." Zachary picked up the bag he had set down. "Then it is fortunate that I do not much care what the people of White River think about my business decisions. My offer stands, Miss Thompson. Is it Miss or Mrs.? Miss Thompson will do," she said. "I have buried the other names with the men who gave them to me." "Miss Thompson, then. Would you like to see the ranch?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. The wagon ride took them out of town and into rolling grassland that stretched toward distant mountains. Zachary drove the team of horses with easy competence, and for a while they traveled in comfortable silence. The evening air was cool and clean, carrying the scent of sage and grass. Hazel watched the landscape pass by and felt something inside her begin to unknot, just slightly. "Have you lived in Montana long?" she asked eventually. 10 years, Zachary said. "I came west when I was 17, worked on other people's ranches until I saved enough to buy my own land. Built the ranch from nothing. Now I have about 200 head of cattle and 5 hired hands who help with the work." "That is impressive. You must have worked very hard." "Hard work is the only way to survive out here." He glanced at her. "You said you were a school teacher in Kansas." "For 1 year between my second and third marriages. The town needed a teacher and I needed work. I enjoyed it, working with the children." "Why did you leave?" "When I married Robert, he wanted to move to Wyoming, try his hand at mining. After he died, I could not afford to stay. I had heard that Montana had opportunities, towns that needed workers. I chose White River because the train fare was within my means." Zachary nodded. "It is a decent town for the most part. The people can be set in their ways, suspicious of outsiders, but they are not bad people." "They think I am cursed," Hazel said. "How did they even know? I only arrived today." "Telegraph, most likely. News travels on the wires, especially sensational news. A woman widowed 3 times makes for good gossip." He said it matter-of-factly, without judgment. "They will come around when they see you are just a person trying to make a living." Hazel was not so sure, but she appreciated his optimism. The ranch came into view as they crested a low hill. The house was a 2-story structure built of logs and stone, solid and well-maintained. A barn and several outbuildings stood nearby, and she could see cattle grazing in the distance, dark shapes against the dimming sky. Chickens pecked in a fenced yard, and a large vegetable garden stretched along the southern side of the house. "It is beautiful," Hazel said honestly. "Thank you. I am proud of it." Zachary pulled the wagon up to the house. "Come on, I will introduce you to Mrs. Chen." The housekeeper was a small Chinese woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and capable hands. She listened as Zachary explained the situation, studied Hazel thoroughly, and then asked her a series of rapid-fire questions about her cooking experience, her cleaning standards, and her ability to rise early and work late. Hazel answered each question honestly, and after several minutes, Mrs. Chen nodded. "You start tomorrow," she declared. 5 in the morning, I show you everything. You get room upstairs, 3 meals a day, and $15 a month." It was more than Hazel had hoped for. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. I will work very hard, I know. If you not work hard, I send you away." But there was a hint of warmth in her stern expression. "You look hungry. Come eat." Dinner was a simple but hearty meal of beef stew, fresh bread, and canned peaches. Hazel sat at the kitchen table with Zachary and Mrs. Chen, and for the first time in a long while, she felt almost like she belonged somewhere. Zachary asked her about her journey to Montana, listened to her stories with genuine interest, and shared some of his own experiences building the ranch. He had a dry sense of humor that surfaced occasionally, catching Hazel by surprise and making her laugh. After dinner, Zachary drove her back to town so she could collect her belongings from the boarding house. Mrs. Caldwell seemed surprised that Hazel was leaving after only a few hours, but took back the key without comment. By the time they returned to the ranch, full darkness had fallen, and the sky was ablaze with stars more numerous than Hazel had ever seen. "Your room is the second door on the left," Mrs. Chen said, showing her upstairs. "Clean sheets, clean basin. You need anything, you tell me tomorrow." The room was small but comfortable, with a real bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the front of the property. It was far nicer than the boarding house room, and Hazel felt a rush of gratitude that made her chest tight. She lay in bed that night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch, the lowing of cattle in the distance, the wind moving through the grass, and she thought about Zachary Owens. He had shown her kindness without knowing anything about her, except that she was desperate and alone. He had believed her when she told him the truth about her husbands, had not looked at her with suspicion or fear. She cautioned herself against reading too much into it. He was her employer, nothing more. She would do her work, keep her head down, and try to build some kind of life for herself here. But as she drifted off to sleep, she could not quite shake the memory of his kind eyes and the way he had said, "It sounds like the harsh realities of life on the frontier, not a curse." Hazel woke before dawn to the sound of Mrs. Chen moving around downstairs. She dressed quickly in her work clothes, an old brown dress with a sturdy apron, and pinned her hair back securely. When she came down to the kitchen, Mrs. Chen was already stoking the stove and pulling out ingredients for breakfast. "Good. You wake on time," Mrs. Chen said approvingly. "First thing, we make breakfast for the men. Zachary and 5 ranch hands. They eat a lot. Then we clean the kitchen, then we start laundry, then we prepare lunch. Afternoon we do mending, preserving, whatever needs doing. Then dinner. You understand?" "I understand," Hazel said, rolling up her sleeves. They worked together in efficient silence, Mrs. Chen showing Hazel where everything was kept and how things were done. They made biscuits, fried eggs and bacon, and a large pot of coffee. The ranch hands began arriving just as the sun peeked over the horizon, filing into the kitchen with tired eyes and quiet greetings. They were a rough-looking group, weathered men in their 20s and 30s, but they were polite enough, tipping their hats to Hazel and thanking Mrs. Chen for the food. Zachary came in last, his hair still damp from washing. He greeted Mrs. Chen warmly, nodded to Hazel, and took his place at the head of the table. "Men, this is Miss Thompson. She will be helping Mrs. Chen around the house. I expect you all to treat her with respect." There were murmurs of agreement, and then everyone focused on eating. Hazel helped Mrs. Chen serve the food and refill coffee cups, noticing how much these men could put away in a single sitting. When they finished, they filed back out to start their day's work, leaving Hazel and Mrs. Chen to tackle the mountain of dirty dishes. "They are good men," Mrs. Chen said as they worked. "They work hard, do not cause trouble, but they are men, so sometimes they are stupid. You have problem, you tell me or you tell Zachary." "I will," Hazel said. "Thank you." The work was indeed hard and the hours long, just as Zachary had warned. By the end of the first day, Hazel's back ached and her hands were red and raw from scrubbing and washing. But it was honest work, and she fell into bed that night with the satisfaction of knowing she had earned her keep. The days developed a rhythm. Wake before dawn, make breakfast, clean, do laundry, prepare lunch, work on the endless list of household tasks, make dinner, clean again, fall into bed. Mrs. Chen was a demanding taskmaster, but also a patient teacher, showing Hazel not just what to do but how to do it efficiently. Hazel learned to manage the large kitchen, to cook for hungry men, to keep the house running smoothly. Zachary was a good employer. He treated her with respect, never asked her to do anything unreasonable, and always thanked her for her work. He often ate breakfast and dinner with them, and during those meals, he would talk about the ranch, about the cattle market, about his plans for the future. Hazel found herself looking forward to those conversations, to the sound of his voice, and the way his face lit up when he talked about something he was passionate about. 3 weeks after Hazel started working at the ranch, Zachary needed to go into White River for supplies. "Would you like to come along?" he asked Hazel that morning after breakfast. "I know Mrs. Chen needs some things from the mercantile, and you might want to see if there is any mail." Hazel hesitated. She had not been back to town since that first day, and the thought of facing those suspicious stares again made her stomach knot. But she could not hide at the ranch forever, and she did need a few small items. "I will come," she said. "Thank you." They made the trip in the wagon, the morning sun warm on their faces. Zachary talked about the cattle prices and how he was hoping to expand his herd next year if the market held. Hazel listened, offering occasional comments, comfortable in his presence in a way that surprised her. When they reached White River, the reaction was immediate. People stared. Conversation stopped. A woman pulled her child inside a shop as they passed. Hazel kept her eyes straight ahead, her spine rigid, refusing to show how much it hurt. Zachary noticed. "Ignore them," he said quietly. "They will get used to you." They stopped at the mercantile first. Inside, Mr. Patterson greeted Zachary warmly, but his eyes turned cold when he saw Hazel. "Mr. Owens," he said stiffly, "what can I do for you today?" Zachary pulled out his list. "I need these supplies and Mrs. Chen sent along her own list. Miss Thompson needs a few items as well." As Mr. Patterson gathered the supplies, two women entered the store. They saw Hazel and immediately began whispering to each other, not even trying to be subtle about it. Hazel felt her cheeks burn but kept her expression neutral. "I heard she has been living at the Owens ranch," one woman said to the other, her voice pitched just loud enough to be clearly heard. "Working there, or so she claims." "That poor man," the other woman replied. "Someone should warn him." 3 dead husbands, and now she has her hooks in Zachary Owens. Mark my words, tragedy will follow. Hazel's hands clenched in the folds of her skirt. She wanted to shout at them, to defend herself, but she knew it would do no good. People believed what they wanted to believe. Zachary, however, had no such compunction. He set down the bag of flour he had been examining and turned to face the women. "Excuse me, Mrs. Hartford, Mrs. Wilson. I could not help but overhear your conversation. I believe you are speaking about my employee, Miss Thompson." The women had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "We meant no offense, Mr. Owens," Mrs. Hartford said. "We are merely concerned for your welfare." "Your concern is misplaced," Zachary said, his tone polite but firm. "Miss Thompson is an excellent worker and a respectable woman who has had the misfortune of losing 3 husbands to accidents and illness. If you have some evidence that she caused these deaths through anything other than terrible luck, I would be interested to hear it. Otherwise, I would appreciate it if you would keep your speculation to yourselves." The women looked shocked. Mrs. Wilson opened her mouth as if to argue, but Zachary continued. "Furthermore, the gossip and coldness this town has shown Miss Thompson is shameful. She came here looking for honest work and a fresh start, and instead she has been treated like a criminal. I would think Christian women such as yourselves would show more charity." "Well," Mrs. Hartford huffed, "I never." "Perhaps that is the problem," Zachary said. He turned back to Mr. Patterson. "Are those supplies ready?" Mr. Patterson, who had been watching the exchange with wide eyes, quickly finished gathering everything. As Zachary paid, Mrs. Hartford and Mrs. Wilson left the store in a huff. Once they were gone, Hazel let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "You did not have to do that," she said quietly. "Yes, I did," Zachary replied. "What they said was wrong and someone needed to tell them so. They will just resent me more now. They will say I have you fooled, that I am using you somehow. Let them say what they want. I know the truth, and so do you. That is what matters." As they loaded the supplies into the wagon, more people stopped to stare. Some looked disapproving, others merely curious. The barber, a friendly man named Tom, waved at them from his shop doorway, which was something. And the blacksmith, a gruff older man everyone called Old Pete, gave Zachary a respectful nod that included Hazel as well. On the ride back to the ranch, Hazel said, "Thank you for what you said in the store. No one has ever defended me like that." Zachary kept his eyes on the road. My mother always said that silence in the face of injustice is the same as agreement. I do not agree with how they are treating you, so I will not stay silent. They think I am cursed, Hazel said. They think I bring death. You are not cursed, Zachary said firmly. You have had terrible luck, more than anyone should have to bear, but that is not the same as being cursed. How can you be so sure? He was quiet for a moment, then said, When I was 19, I worked on a ranch down in Wyoming. There was a bad winter that year, one of the worst in memory. We lost half the herd to the cold and starvation. The ranch owner's son, a good man named James, went out in a blizzard to try to bring some cattle in. He never came back. They found his body 3 days later, frozen solid. His father blamed himself, said if he had stopped James from going out, he would still be alive. He carried that guilt until the day he died. But the truth was, James made his own choice. The blizzard killed him, not his father's decision or bad luck or a curse, just the harsh reality of life out here. Your husband's died because of accidents and disease, not because of you. Hazel felt tears sting her eyes. I wish everyone saw it that way. I will prove them wrong, Zachary said, turning to look at her. His eyes were intense, determined. I will prove them all wrong about you. You are not cursed. You are a good person who has suffered too much. And if I have to tell every person in White River that fact until they believe it, I will. The conviction in his voice made Hazel's heart ache in a way she could not quite name. Why? She asked. Why do you care so much about what people think of me? Zachary turned his attention back to the horses, but she saw the slight flush on his cheeks. Because it is the right thing to do, and because I believe everyone deserves a chance to be seen for who they really are, not judged by circumstances beyond their control. They rode the rest of the way in silence, but it was a comfortable silence, and Hazel found herself thinking about Zachary's words over and over. He saw her. Not the cursed widow, not the woman who brought death, but just Hazel, a person trying to survive and build a life. It had been so long since anyone had seen her that way. Over the following weeks, Hazel noticed a change in how Zachary treated her. Not in his professionalism, he was always respectful and appropriate, but in small ways that made her heart flutter despite her best efforts to remain detached. He would seek her out in the evenings after work, sitting on the front porch with a cup of coffee and asking about her day. He brought her small gifts from town, a new pair of work gloves when he noticed hers were worn through, a book of poetry when he remembered her saying she enjoyed reading. He made her laugh with stories about his ranch hands and their various misadventures. Mrs. Chen noticed too. One afternoon while they were preserving vegetables, the older woman said, "Zachary likes you." Hazel nearly dropped the jar she was holding. "He is my employer. He is kind to everyone." "He is not kind to everyone the way he is kind to you. He watches you when you do not see. He smiles when you come into the room. He defends you in town." "That does not mean anything," Hazel protested, but her cheeks were warm. "You like him too," Mrs. Chen said. It was not a question. Hazel focused on filling another jar. "It does not matter if I do. I am cursed, remember. 3 dead husbands. Even if Zachary does not believe in curses, even if I do not believe in curses, the fact remains that terrible things happen to the men I marry. I will not risk that again." "I will not risk him." Mrs. Chen made a dismissive sound. "You are not cursed, you are just unlucky, but luck changes." "Does it? Because from where I stand, my luck has been consistently terrible for 6 years. "Luck already changed," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "You came here, you found work. You found Zachary. That is good luck." Hazel wanted to believe her, but fear held her back. The fear of loss, of causing more pain, of watching another man she cared about die. Because she was starting to care about Zachary, she could not deny it. She enjoyed his company, looked forward to their conversations, felt safe and valued in his presence. But caring about someone when you believed you brought death was a terrible burden. That evening, Zachary found her on the porch after dinner. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant reds and oranges. He sat down beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body in the cooling air. "Beautiful evening," he said. "It is," Hazel agreed. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars begin to emerge. Then Zachary said, "I need to ask you something, and I want an honest answer." Hazel's stomach tightened. "All right. Are you happy here, working on the ranch?" "Very happy," she said truthfully. "This is the first place I have felt safe in a long time." "Good. I am glad." He paused. "The reason I ask is because I want to make sure you know you are welcome here for as long as you want to stay, not just as a worker but as a friend. You have a home here, Hazel, if you want it." The use of her first name made her heart skip. "Thank you, Zachary. That means more to me than I can express." "There is something else," he said, and now there was a note of nervousness in his voice. "I have been thinking about this for a while, and I am just going to say it plainly. I have feelings for you, Hazel, romantic feelings. I know the situation is complicated, and I am your employer, and you have been through so much. I am not asking you to feel the same way. I just wanted you to know the truth." Hazel's breath caught. She turned to look at him and saw sincerity in his eyes, along with vulnerability and hope. "Zachary, you do not have to say anything right now," he said quickly. "I do not want to make you uncomfortable or pressure you in any way. Your position here is secure regardless of how you feel. I just wanted to be honest with you." "I do have feelings for you," Hazel said quietly. "But I am scared, Zachary. I am terrified. 3 men have died after marrying me. What if something happens to you? What if I get thrown from a horse tomorrow?" Zachary interrupted gently. "What if the barn catches fire? What if I get sick? Life is full of dangers and uncertainties, Hazel. We cannot live in fear of what might happen. We can only make the best choices we can with the time we have." "But 3 times," Hazel said desperately. "How can that be coincidence?" "People die, Hazel, especially out here on the frontier. Every single person in White River knows someone who has died young, who has been killed in an accident or taken by disease. It is tragic, and I am sorry you have suffered so much loss. But it does not mean you are responsible. It does not mean you are cursed." "I want to believe that," Hazel whispered. "Then believe it. Choose to believe it." He reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. "I am not afraid of you or your supposed curse. I am only afraid of letting you slip away because of fear." Hazel looked down at their joined hands. His touch felt right, solid and real and safe. She thought about the past few months, about how happy she had been here, about how Zachary had defended her and believed in her when no one else would. She thought about Mrs. Chen saying her luck had already changed. "I am still afraid," she said honestly. "That is all right. We can be afraid together." He smiled at her, that warm smile that made her feel seen. "We do not have to rush anything. We can take this slow, see how things develop. No pressure, no expectations. Just 2 people getting to know each other and seeing where it leads." Hazel took a breath and made a decision. "I would like that." The smile that broke across Zachary's face was like sunrise. "Yeah, she said, and found herself smiling back. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture so sweet and old-fashioned that it made her heart ache. "Thank you for giving us a chance." They sat on the porch until full dark, talking and holding hands, and for the first time in years, Hazel allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, her luck really had changed. The next few months passed in a kind of golden haze. Hazel and Zachary courted each other in the old-fashioned way, with chaperoned outings and proper propriety, though Mrs. Chen was a relaxed chaperone who often conveniently needed to check on something in another room. They took walks around the ranch property, went on picnics by the creek that ran through the western pasture, and spent countless evenings on the porch talking about everything and nothing. Zachary told her about growing up in Illinois, about losing his father to a factory accident when he was 16, about coming west with nothing but a bedroll and determination. Hazel told him about her childhood in Ohio, about her mother who had died when she was 12, about her father who had remarried and died of influenza when she was 17, leaving her alone in the world. They talked about their dreams and fears, their hopes for the future, their favorite books and foods and songs. And slowly, carefully, Hazel began to believe that maybe she could have this. Maybe she could have happiness and love without disaster following. Zachary was healthy and strong, careful and competent. He had lived this hard frontier life for 10 years and survived. There was no reason to think that would change, but White River had not forgotten about her, and the town's opinion had not softened. When Zachary took her to church one Sunday, the congregation whispered and stared. The minister gave a sermon about the dangers of temptation and poor judgment that was clearly aimed at Zachary. Several people pointedly refused to shake his hand after the service. "I am sorry," Hazel said as they drove back to the ranch. "I am damaging your reputation." "My reputation will survive," Zachary said firmly. "Theirs, however, is suffering greatly in my estimation." The harassment escalated. Someone left a dead crow on the ranch gate with a note that said "cursed." One of the ranch hands quit, saying his wife was frightened of Hazel and had given him an ultimatum. Several of Zachary's business associates sent letters expressing concern about his association with the cursed widow. Zachary responded to each incident with calm determination. He removed the dead crow and burned the note. He hired a new ranch hand to replace the one who quit. He wrote back to his business associates, thanking them for their concern and informing them that Miss Thompson was a fine woman and their relationship was none of their business. "Why are you doing this?" Hazel asked him one evening after another unpleasant incident in town. "You could have any woman you wanted, someone respectable, someone who would not bring you trouble. Why me?" Zachary cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle. "Because I do not want any other woman. I want you, Hazel. I want your kindness and your strength and your terrible coffee-making skills." "My coffee is not that bad," she protested, but she was smiling. "It is pretty bad," he said, grinning. "But I do not care. I want all of you, the good and the bad, the easy and the difficult. I want the life we can build together. And if something happens to you, if the curse is real, then I will have died loving you, which is better than living a long life without you." He kissed her forehead. "I will prove them all wrong, Hazel. I will show them that you are not cursed, that we can be happy together. Just give me the chance." Hazel wrapped her arms around him and held on tight, letting herself believe. 6 months after Hazel had first arrived at the ranch, Zachary asked her to marry him. It was a simple proposal, just the two of them sitting by the creek on a warm spring afternoon, wildflowers blooming all around them. He did not have a ring, but he had carved a small wooden figure of a horse, her favorite animal, and he presented it to her with a nervous smile. "I know I should have a ring," he said. "I will get you one, I promise. But I wanted to ask you now, here, because this is where I realized I was in love with you. This is where I knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life with you." Hazel took the carved horse, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "When did you realize?" she asked. "About 3 weeks after you started working here. We were walking back from checking the fence line, and you were telling me some story about your students in Kansas. You were laughing and the sun was in your hair and I just knew. I knew you were the one." Tears filled Hazel's eyes. "I love you too," she whispered. "But I am so scared, Zachary. I cannot lose you. I cannot bury another husband." "You will not," he said with absolute certainty. "We are going to have a long, happy life together. We are going to grow old on this ranch, raise children if we are blessed with them, and prove every single person in White River wrong about you. You cannot promise that. No one can promise that." "Then I will promise this. Whatever time we have, however long or short, I will spend every day making you happy. I will love you with everything I have. And if something does happen to me, it will not be because of you. It will just be life, the same as it is for everyone. Will you marry me, Hazel?" She looked into his eyes, those clear green-gray eyes full of love and hope and determination, and she made the bravest decision of her life. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." He let out a whoop of joy that startled the birds from the trees and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around until they both collapsed in the grass, laughing. He kissed her then, their first real kiss, and it was everything Hazel had hoped for and been too afraid to dream about. They set the wedding date for 2 months later, giving them time to prepare and, as Zachary said, giving the town time to get used to the idea. He bought her a simple gold band from the jeweler in town, ignoring the man's dire warnings about marrying the cursed widow. He arranged for the minister to perform the ceremony, though the man agreed reluctantly, and only after Zachary made a substantial donation to the church. Hazel sewed herself a new dress, pale yellow cotton with white lace at the collar and cuffs. Mrs. Chen helped her with the more intricate stitching and declared it beautiful when it was finished. The older woman had become like a mother to Hazel, and when Zachary asked who would stand up for Hazel at the wedding, Mrs. Chen volunteered immediately. The night before the wedding, Hazel lay in her bed unable to sleep. Fear gnawed at her, insidious and persistent. What if something happened to Zachary? What if the curse was real after all? What if she was making a terrible mistake? A soft knock on her door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Hazel, are you awake?" Mrs. Chen's voice. "Come in," Hazel said, sitting up. Mrs. Chen entered carrying a candle. She sat on the edge of the bed and studied Hazel's face. "You are afraid." "Terrified," Hazel admitted. "That is normal. Everyone is afraid before their wedding. It is a big step." "But what if something happens? What if I lose him like I lost the others?" Mrs. Chen took Hazel's hand. "Listen to me. I am going to tell you something I have not told many people. I had a husband once back in China. Good man, worked hard, loved me very much. He died when I was 25. Fever took him in 3 days. After he died, people said I was unlucky. They said I brought death to my family because my mother had died when I was born. They said no man should marry me or come near me." Hazel squeezed her hand. "I did not know. I am so sorry. I believed them for a long time. I thought I was cursed too. Then I came to America, came to Montana, started working for Zachary's father before Zachary owned the ranch. And you know what I learned? Everyone loses people. Everyone faces death and grief and tragedy. It is not a curse. It is just life. The curse is believing you do not deserve happiness because you have known sorrow." "But 3 times," Hazel whispered. "So what? 3 times, 4 times, it does not matter. Each death was its own tragedy, but none of them were your fault. You did not push the wagon over the mountain. You did not bring the cholera. You did not make the horse throw your husband. These things happened because life is dangerous and unpredictable. Tomorrow you are going to marry a good man who loves you. Do not let fear steal your happiness." Hazel felt tears spill down her cheeks. "What if I lose him too? Then you will grieve and you will survive because that is what strong women do. But you will also have had the time you had together and that will have been worth it. Love is always worth the risk, Hazel. Always. Hazel hugged Mrs. Chen tightly. Thank you, she said. Thank you for being here, for being my friend. You are like a daughter to me, Mrs. Chen said gruffly. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow is a big day. The wedding took place on a bright Saturday morning in June. They held the ceremony at the church in White River, and despite everything, it was well attended. Some people came out of genuine goodwill, others out of morbid curiosity, but they came. Zachary stood at the altar in his best suit, his face lighting up when Hazel walked down the aisle on Mrs. Chen's arm. The minister performed the ceremony with professional efficiency if not warmth. When he asked if anyone objected to the union, several people shifted in their seats, but no one spoke up. And when Zachary said, "I do," in a clear, firm voice, when he slipped the ring onto Hazel's finger and kissed her in front of the entire town, it felt like a declaration of war against superstition and fear. The reception was held at the ranch, a simple affair with food and music and dancing. Many of the wedding guests did not come, but those who did seemed to enjoy themselves. Old Pete the blacksmith gave them a set of fireplace tools he had forged himself. Tom the barber and his wife brought fresh bread and jam. A few of the other ranchers and their families came, offering congratulations and gifts. But the best moment came near the end of the evening, when Zachary pulled Hazel onto the makeshift dance floor and held her close as they swayed to the music. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Owens?" he asked, his eyes warm. "Like the luckiest woman alive," Hazel said and meant it, "and terrified, but mostly lucky." "The terror will fade," Zachary promised. "I am going to prove to you every single day that we are going to be fine, that we are going to build a beautiful life together." "I believe you," Hazel said. And for the first time she truly did. They spent their wedding night in Zachary's room, which was now their room. He was gentle and patient with her, and Hazel felt herself relax into his touch, into this new intimacy. Afterwards, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, she felt a peace she had not known in years. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," he murmured, kissing the top of her head. "And I am not going anywhere." The first few weeks of marriage passed without incident, which should have been reassuring but somehow made Hazel more nervous. She kept waiting for disaster to strike, for the curse to manifest. Every time Zachary went out to work with the cattle, she worried. Every time he rode into town, she feared he would not come back. Every cough, every minor injury sent her into a spiral of anxiety. Zachary noticed, of course. He was patient and understanding, talking her down from her fears, reassuring her constantly. But Hazel could see the worry in his eyes, and she hated that she was doing this to him, that her fear was casting a shadow over their happiness. 1 month after their wedding, Zachary had to make a trip to Helena to conduct some business with cattle buyers. It was a 3-day journey each way, and Hazel nearly made herself sick with worry while he was gone. She could not eat, could barely sleep, convinced that something terrible would happen to him on the road. Mrs. Chen tried to distract her with work, but even cooking and cleaning could not quiet her anxious thoughts. She found herself making bargains with God, with fate, with the universe. "Let him come home safe, and I will never ask for anything again. Let him come home safe, and I will believe the curse is broken." When Zachary rode up to the ranch house 6 days later, dusty and tired but safe and whole, Hazel ran out to meet him. She threw herself into his arms before he had even dismounted, tears streaming down her face. Hey, I am fine," he said, holding her close. "Hazel, I am fine. Everything is all right." "I was so worried," she sobbed into his chest. "I thought something would happen, I thought." Nothing happened. The trip was boring and uneventful, exactly as it should be. He pulled back to look at her, his expression concerned. "Hazel, we need to talk about this." That evening, after dinner, they sat together in their room. Zachary held both of her hands and said, "This cannot go on. I cannot live my life knowing that every time I leave the ranch, you are torturing yourself with worry, and you cannot live your life in constant fear that I am going to die." "I do not know how to stop," Hazel said miserably. "I try to trust that everything will be fine, but the fear just takes over." "I think you need to make a choice," Zachary said gently. "You need to decide, truly decide, whether you believe in this curse or not. Because right now you are living in this middle ground where part of you believes it and part of you does not, and it is tearing you apart. But what if I decide it is not real and then something happens to you? What if I let my guard down and then? And then what? You think your vigilance is keeping me safe, that your worry is somehow protecting me." His voice was kind but firm. "Hazel, if I am meant to die tomorrow, your fear will not prevent it. And if I am meant to live to a ripe old age, your fear will not cause my death. All your fear is doing is stealing your joy, stealing our joy." Hazel knew he was right, but knowing and feeling were different things. "I am trying," she whispered. "I know you are, but I need you to try harder. I need you to choose to trust in our future. Can you do that?" She looked into his eyes and saw love and patience, but also a plea. He was asking her to have faith, not just in him, but in life itself. To believe that happiness was possible, that love did not have to end in tragedy. "I will try," she said. "I will really try. That is all I ask." Over the following months, Hazel worked hard to control her fear. When Zachary left the ranch, she forced herself to focus on her work rather than spiraling into anxiety. When he came home late from working in the far pastures, she resisted the urge to imagine worst-case scenarios. It was not easy and she had setbacks, but gradually, slowly, the fear began to loosen its grip. It helped that life went on, uneventfully and happily. Zachary did not get thrown from a horse or trampled by cattle or struck by lightning. He came home every evening, kissed her hello, and told her about his day. They settled into married life, learning each other's rhythms and quirks, building a partnership that felt solid and real. The town, too, began to soften toward Hazel. Not everyone and not quickly, but bit by bit. When she and Zachary attended church, fewer people stared. When she went into town for supplies, more people greeted her politely. The minister's wife even invited her to join the church ladies' sewing circle, a gesture that shocked Hazel so much she nearly said no before Mrs. Chen kicked her under the table and she accepted. The sewing circle was awkward at first. The women were polite but cool, clearly unsure how to treat her. But Hazel was an excellent seamstress, and when she helped Mrs. Hartford fix a difficult pattern, the older woman thawed slightly. When she made Mrs. Wilson laugh with a self-deprecating story about burning dinner spectacularly the week before, things eased a bit more. "I suppose we were hasty in our judgment," Mrs. Hartford said one afternoon, several months into Hazel's attendance. "You seem a perfectly respectable woman." It was not exactly a warm apology, but it was something. "Thank you," Hazel said. "I know my history is unusual. I understand why people were suspicious. 3 dead husbands is more than unusual," Mrs. Wilson said. "But you have been married to Mr. Owens for nearly 6 months now, and he seems perfectly healthy. Perhaps we were wrong about the curse." "There was no curse," Hazel said firmly, "just terrible luck, but my luck has changed now." She believed it, she realized. She truly believed it. At some point over the past months, without her quite noticing when, the fear had transformed into faith. She trusted that Zachary would be all right, that they would be all right, and that trust gave her a freedom she had not felt in years. That evening, she told Zachary about the conversation. They were lying in bed, her head on his shoulder, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her arm. "They are starting to accept me," she said. "The women in town, they are starting to see me as a person instead of a curse." "Good," Zachary said. "I told you I would prove them wrong." "You did," Hazel agreed. "You kept your promise. You showed them that I am not cursed, that we can be happy together." "We are happy, are we not? So happy," she said, tilting her head up to kiss him. "Happier than I ever thought I could be." "Me too," he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. 1 year after their wedding, Hazel discovered she was pregnant. The realization filled her with joy and, inevitably, a resurgence of fear. She worried throughout the pregnancy, terrified that something would go wrong, that the curse would manifest in some new way. But Zachary was endlessly patient, holding her when she cried, reassuring her when she panicked, staying calm and steady when she could not. Mrs. Chen was a godsend, helping with the pregnancy symptoms and preparing the house for the baby. "You are strong," she told Hazel firmly when the younger woman expressed her fears. "You will be fine. Baby will be fine. Stop borrowing trouble." The pregnancy progressed normally and healthily. Zachary attended to Hazel's every need, sometimes to the point of being overprotective, which made her laugh even as it touched her heart. He read every book he could find on pregnancy and childbirth, consulted with the doctor in town repeatedly, and prepared the nursery with meticulous care. When Hazel went into labor on a cold January night, Zachary sent one of the ranch hands racing for the doctor while he and Mrs. Chen stayed with Hazel. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Hazel thought she might not survive it. But Mrs. Chen coached her through, and Zachary held her hand and told her how strong she was, how proud he was of her, how much he loved her. Just after dawn, their son was born, a healthy baby boy with a powerful set of lungs and his father's gray-green eyes. Zachary cried when he held him for the first time, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his son with awe and wonder. "He is perfect," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Hazel, he is perfect. You are perfect. I love you so much." Hazel, exhausted and exhilarated and overwhelmed, looked at her husband and their baby and felt her heart expand with more love than she had known it could hold. "What should we name him?" she asked. They had discussed names but never settled on one. Zachary looked down at the baby, then at Hazel. "What do you think of Marcus Owens?" Hazel tried out. "I like it. It is strong." "Marcus it is, then." Zachary leaned down to kiss her forehead. "Thank you, Hazel. Thank you for our son. Thank you for giving me this family." "Thank you for believing in me," Hazel said. "Thank you for loving me when no one else would." The first few months with a newborn were exhausting and wonderful and completely overwhelming. Hazel had never been so tired in her life, but she had also never been so happy. Watching Zachary with Marcus, seeing him be gentle and patient and loving with their son, made her fall in love with him all over again. The town, too, celebrated the birth. People brought gifts, offered congratulations, and cooed over the baby when Hazel brought him to church. It seemed that having a child had completed Hazel's transformation in their eyes from cursed widow to respectable wife and mother. She was now simply Mrs. Owens, part of the community, accepted and even liked. One afternoon when Marcus was 3 months old, Mrs. Hartford stopped by the ranch with a basket of baby clothes her own children had outgrown. As Hazel thanked her and offered her tea, the older woman said, "I owe you an apology, Mrs. Owens. I was unkind to you when you first came to White River. I believed in gossip and superstition instead of giving you a fair chance. I am sorry." Hazel was so surprised she nearly dropped the teacup she was holding. "Thank you, Mrs. Hartford. That means a great deal to me. You have proved yourself to be a good woman and a good wife." Mr. Owens is a lucky man, and White River is better for having you here." She paused. "I hope you can forgive us for how we treated you." "Of course," Hazel said. "I understand. My history was unusual and people were just being cautious." "We were being cruel," Mrs. Hartford corrected. "There is a difference, but you have handled it all with grace and dignity. You should be proud of yourself." After she left, Hazel sat in her rocking chair with Marcus in her arms and cried, but they were happy tears. She had done it. She had survived the suspicion and the fear and the curse. She had built a new life, a good life, a life filled with love and family and community. The cursed widow was gone, and in her place was simply Hazel, wife and mother and friend. The years passed quickly and happily. Marcus grew into a sturdy, cheerful toddler who adored his father and followed him around the ranch whenever he was allowed. When he was 2 years old, Hazel discovered she was pregnant again. This time there was less fear, just excitement and anticipation. She had proven to herself that she could do this, that she could carry and deliver a healthy baby, that her supposed curse held no power over her or her family. Their daughter was born in the spring, a beautiful baby girl with Hazel's auburn hair and Zachary's smile. They named her Rose, and she completed their family in a way that felt perfect and right. The ranch prospered as well. Zachary expanded his herd, hired more ranch hands, and built a new barn. He became known as a fair employer and a shrewd businessman, and people came from all over Montana to buy his cattle. Hazel managed the household with Mrs. Chen's help, raised their children, and became an active member of the community. She joined the church committee, helped organize town events, and taught Sunday school. When Marcus was 6 and Rose was 4, the minister of White River stood up during church one Sunday and made an announcement. "I have been asked to share some news with the congregation," he said. 10 years ago, a woman came to our town. We judged her harshly and treated her poorly because of rumors and superstition. We called her cursed and made her feel unwelcome. I am ashamed to say I was among those who judged her. But that woman, Mrs. Hazel Owens, has proven herself to be one of the finest members of our community. She has been a devoted wife, a loving mother, and a generous friend to many. Today, I want to publicly apologize to Mrs. Owens for the way we treated her, and I want to thank her for showing us that we were wrong. We are a better town for having her here." Hazel sat in her pew, tears streaming down her face as the entire congregation stood and applauded. Zachary squeezed her hand, his own eyes wet, and whispered, "I told you I would prove them all wrong." After the service, people lined up to speak to Hazel, to apologize, to thank her, to tell her how much they valued her. It was overwhelming and humbling and healing in a way she had not known she needed. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset while Marcus and Rose played in the yard, Hazel said to Zachary, "Do you remember the day we met? When I was standing in front of the mercantile, defeated and hopeless?" "I remember," Zachary said. "You looked so sad and so strong at the same time. I knew I had to help you." "You saved me," Hazel said. "You saw past the curse to the person underneath. You gave me a chance when no one else would. You loved me when I could not love myself." "You saved yourself," Zachary corrected. "You had the courage to keep going, to start over, to trust again even when you were terrified. I just gave you a safe place to do it." "We saved each other," Hazel said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "And we built something beautiful together." "We did," Zachary agreed. "And we are not done yet. We have so much more life ahead of us, so much more happiness to find." He was right. They had years ahead of them, years of watching their children grow, of working the ranch together, of being part of the community they had built. Marcus would grow up to be a rancher like his father, steady and kind and strong. Rose would become a teacher, bringing learning and light to children just as Hazel once had. They would have grandchildren who would play in the same fields where their parents had played, who would grow up hearing the story of how their grandmother came to White River when everyone thought she was cursed, and how their grandfather had loved her anyway and proved the whole town wrong. As the sun set over the Montana mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of pink and gold, Hazel thought about how far she had come. From the cursed widow arriving in White River with nothing but a carpetbag and despair, to a woman surrounded by love and family and acceptance. The curse had never been real, she understood that now. It had been grief and fear and the human need to find patterns in tragedy. But the love was real. The life she had built was real. The happiness she felt was real. And when she looked at Zachary, at his strong profile and kind eyes, at the way he watched their children with such love and pride, she knew that this was what happily ever after looked like. Not perfect, not without challenges or worries, but full of love and laughter and the deep contentment of being exactly where you belonged. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Hazel took Zachary's hand and squeezed it gently. He turned to her with a smile, and in that moment, everything was exactly as it should be. The cursed widow was gone, replaced by a woman who had found her place in the world, who had dared to love again despite her fear, who had built a beautiful life from the ashes of her past. And in a small town in Montana, at a ranch called home, surrounded by the people she loved most in the world, Hazel Thompson Owens had never been more certain that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The curse had been broken, not by magic or fate, but by love and courage and the simple act of refusing to give up. And that, she thought, was the most powerful magic of all. The autumn of their 10th wedding anniversary arrived with cooler winds and leaves turning gold across the ranch. Hazel stood in the kitchen early one morning, preparing breakfast for her family, and marveled at how much had changed since that first terrifying day in White River. The kitchen was warm and filled with the smells of bacon and coffee, and through the window she could see Zachary teaching Marcus how to repair a fence line while Rose helped Mrs. Chen gather eggs from the chicken coop. Mrs. Chen had grown older but no less sharp, and she had become an irreplaceable part of their family. She doted on the children, taught them practical skills and life lessons in equal measure, and still ran the household with efficient precision. When Hazel had suggested she might want to retire and simply enjoy her later years in comfort, Mrs. Chen had looked offended and said she would work until she dropped dead, and not a moment before. The sound of boots on the porch made Hazel smile. Zachary came in with Marcus, both of them covered in dust but grinning. At 8 years old, Marcus was already showing signs of growing into a tall, strong young man like his father. He had the same steady temperament, the same quiet confidence, and the same kind heart. "Morning, Ma," Marcus said, going to the basin to wash his hands. "Pa says I did real good with the fence today." "You did excellent," Zachary confirmed, ruffling his son's hair. "He is a natural rancher." Rose burst through the door, her auburn curls escaping from her braids, carefully carrying a basket of eggs. "Look, Mama, 10 eggs today. Mrs. Chen says that is the most all week." "That is wonderful, sweetheart," Hazel said, taking the basket and praising her daughter's care in not breaking any of them. They sat down to breakfast together, the family and Mrs. Chen, passing dishes and talking about the day's plans. It was these ordinary moments that Hazel treasured most, the simple dailiness of life with people she loved. No curse, no tragedy, just a family sharing a meal and planning their day. After breakfast, Zachary pulled Hazel aside. "I have something to show you," he said, his eyes twinkling with a secret. "Can you spare an hour?" "Of course," Hazel said, curious. He led her out to the barn where 2 horses were already saddled and waiting. They mounted up and rode out across the ranch, following the creek westward. The morning sun was bright but not yet hot, and the air smelled of grass and autumn wildflowers. They rode in comfortable silence until they reached a spot Hazel did not recognize, a gentle rise that overlooked the entire valley. "What are we doing here?" Hazel asked as they dismounted. "Look," Zachary said, gesturing to the valley below. "What do you see?" Hazel looked. She saw the ranch house and outbuildings, the pastures with cattle grazing, the creek winding through the property, the mountains rising in the distance. "I see home," she said. "I see everything we have built together." "Exactly," Zachary said. 10 years ago you arrived in Montana with nothing. You were alone and afraid and convinced you were cursed. And now look at what you have. Look at what we have. A thriving ranch, 2 beautiful children, a place in the community. You did that, Hazel. Your strength, your courage, your refusal to give up even when things seemed impossible. We did that, Hazel corrected. I could not have done any of it without you. We are a team, Zachary agreed, but I want you to see this, to really see it and understand. You are not cursed. You never were. You are blessed. We are blessed. And I wanted you to stand here in this place and know that beyond any doubt. Hazel looked out at the valley, at the life they had built, and felt something inside her shift and settle into place. He was right. She was blessed, not cursed. The tragedies of her past had been real and painful, but they had not defined her. She had survived them, learned from them, and built something beautiful in their wake. "Thank you," she said to Zachary, turning to face him. "Thank you for never giving up on me, for believing in me when I could not believe in myself. Thank you for proving them all wrong." "It was my privilege," Zachary said, pulling her into his arms, "and I would do it all again in a heartbeat." They stood there on the hillside, holding each other, looking out at their land and their life, and Hazel felt a completeness she had never known before. All the broken pieces of her past had been gathered up and forged into something new and strong and beautiful. She was whole again, perhaps for the first time in her life. As they rode back to the ranch, Hazel thought about the woman she had been 10 years ago, frightened and desperate and alone. If she could speak to that woman now, she would tell her that everything was going to be all right, that she would find love and safety and home, that the curse was just a story, and the real story was about a woman who refused to stop hoping, who dared to love again, and who built a beautiful life from the ruins of the past. The anniversary celebration that evening was a joyous affair. Zachary had arranged for some of their friends and neighbors to come to the ranch for a party. Mrs. Hartford and Mrs. Wilson arrived together, bringing pies and warm wishes. Old Pete, the blacksmith, came with a beautiful wrought iron gate he had made for their garden. Tom the barber and his wife brought their children to play with Marcus and Rose. Even the minister came, offering prayers and blessings for their continued happiness. As Hazel moved through the party, accepting congratulations and visiting with friends, she marveled at how much her life had changed. These people who had once shunned her now embraced her as one of their own. The town that had called her cursed now celebrated her marriage and her family. She had gone from outcast to beloved community member, and it felt like a miracle. Later, after the guests had gone home and the children were in bed, Hazel and Zachary sat on the porch in their usual spot. The night was clear and cool, and the stars were brilliant overhead. "Happy anniversary," Zachary said, handing her a small wrapped package. Hazel opened it to find a delicate gold locket. Inside were tiny photographs of Marcus and Rose. "Oh, Zachary, it is beautiful," she breathed. "Not as beautiful as you," he said, and though the words were corny, he said them with such sincerity that they made her heart swell. "I have something for you too," Hazel said, suddenly nervous. It is not wrapped or anything. It is more of an announcement." Zachary looked at her curiously. "What kind of announcement?" Hazel took his hand and placed it on her belly. "We are going to have another baby." The expression that crossed Zachary's face was pure joy. "Really? Are you sure?" "Very sure. I wanted to wait until today to tell you. I thought it would be a good anniversary present." "It is the best present," Zachary said, pulling her close. "Another baby, another blessing. Our family just keeps growing." "Are you happy?" Hazel asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "I am so happy I could burst," he said. "You have given me everything, Hazel, everything I ever wanted and more than I ever dreamed of." "You gave it to me first," she said. "You gave me hope when I had none. You gave me love when I thought I did not deserve it. You gave me a future when I thought I had none." They sat together in the darkness, holding each other, and Hazel thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that first meeting in White River, through all the challenges and fears and triumphs, to this moment of perfect contentment. It had not been easy, but it had been worth it. Every struggle, every tear, every moment of doubt had led to this happiness, this fullness, this love. The baby was born the following spring. Another son they named Daniel. He was a calm, quiet baby who seemed content to observe the world around him with solemn eyes. Marcus and Rose adored their new brother, fighting over who got to hold him and help care for him. The ranch house, always full of life, became even more lively with 3 children running around. As the years continued to pass, the Owens family became a fixture in White River. Zachary served on the town council, helping make decisions about roads and schools and development. Hazel started a lending library in town, donating books from her own collection and encouraging others to do the same. Together, they sponsored a new schoolhouse, wanting to ensure that all the children in the area had access to education. Marcus grew into a responsible young man who loved ranching as much as his father did. Rose showed a talent for teaching and would often gather the younger children in town to tell them stories and teach them songs. Daniel, quieter than his siblings, developed a love for horses and spent hours in the stables, learning everything he could about their care. When Hazel turned 38, she stood in front of her mirror one morning and studied her reflection. There were lines around her eyes now, threads of silver in her auburn hair. Her hands showed the wear of years of hard work. But when she looked at herself, she did not see a cursed widow or even just a survivor. She saw a woman who had lived fully, who had loved deeply, who had overcome tremendous odds to build a beautiful life. That afternoon, a young woman arrived in White River on the afternoon train. She was perhaps 20 years old, dressed in worn travel clothes, carrying a small bag and an expression of fear and desperation that Hazel recognized immediately. Word spread quickly, as it always did in small towns. The girl was a widow, married briefly to a man who had died in a mining accident. His family had blamed her, called her unlucky, driven her away. When Hazel heard the story, she knew what she had to do. She found the girl, Emma Crawford, sitting alone on a bench outside the train station, looking lost and hopeless. "Excuse me," Hazel said gently. "My name is Hazel Owens. I heard you just arrived in town." The girl looked up, her eyes red from crying. "I am Emma. I do not suppose you know of any work available. I can cook and clean and sew. I am a hard worker." "As it happens, I do know of some work," Hazel said, sitting down beside her. "But first, can I tell you a story?" Over the next hour, Hazel told Emma her own story. About the 3 dead husbands, about coming to White River and being called cursed, about Zachary seeing past the curse to the person underneath, about building a life and a family and proving everyone wrong. Emma listened with wide eyes, and by the end, tears were streaming down her face. "You understand," Emma said. You actually understand what it is like." "I do," Hazel said. "And I want you to know that you are not cursed. You are not unlucky. You are a young woman who has suffered a terrible loss, and you deserve compassion and support, not blame. No one else sees it that way." "Then they are wrong," Hazel said firmly. "And I am going to help you prove them wrong, just like someone once helped me." She took Emma home to the ranch, where Zachary greeted the girl with the same kindness he had once shown Hazel. They gave her a job, a room, and most importantly, a place to heal and rebuild her life. And over the following months, as Emma began to smile again, to hope again, Hazel saw her own journey reflected back at her and understood just how far she had come. The town, too, learned from Emma's presence. They saw how Hazel took her in without judgment, how the Owens family treated her with respect and kindness. And slowly, they began to question their own tendency to see patterns and curses where there was only tragedy and bad luck. Emma eventually married a clerk from the general store, a quiet man who loved her for who she was and never mentioned her first husband's death. And when that marriage proved happy and lasting, it was one more piece of evidence that curses existed only in people's minds. On the evening of Hazel and Zachary's 20th wedding anniversary, the town threw them a party in the church hall. It seemed like everyone in White River attended, bringing food and gifts and toasting to their long and happy marriage. The minister, now quite elderly, gave a short speech about how the Owens family had enriched the community and how their love story was an inspiration to all. Marcus, now 18 and preparing to take over more of the ranch responsibilities, stood up to say a few words. "My parents have taught me many things," he said, his voice steady and clear. "They taught me how to work hard, how to treat people with respect, how to care for the land and the animals. But most importantly, they taught me that love is the most powerful force there is. Love can overcome fear, can break curses, can build something beautiful from nothing. I am proud to be their son, and I hope to live my life with the same courage and kindness they have shown." Rose, 16 and already planning to attend normal school to become a teacher, spoke next. "Mama used to tell me about when she first came to White River, about how scared she was and how people treated her. And then she would tell me about how Papa saw past all that to who she really was. That story taught me to always look deeper, to never judge people by rumors or appearances, to give everyone a chance. Thank you, Mama and Papa, for teaching me that." Daniel, at 14 already as tall as his father and spending every free moment with the horses, simply said, "You are the best parents anyone could ask for. I love you." Hazel could barely see through her tears as her children sat down. Zachary squeezed her hand, his own eyes damp, and whispered, "We did good." "We did amazing," Hazel corrected. When it was time for Hazel and Zachary to speak, they stood together at the front of the hall, holding hands and looking out at the sea of friendly faces. 20 years ago, Zachary began, I met a woman in front of the mercantile. She looked lost and afraid, and something told me I needed to help her. It was the best decision I ever made. 20 years ago, Hazel continued, I came to this town expecting nothing but more rejection and loneliness. Instead, I found a man who believed in me when no one else would. A man who promised to prove everyone wrong about me, and he kept that promise. We kept it together, Zachary said, because that is what love is. It is choosing someone every day, standing by them through challenges, believing in them when they cannot believe in themselves. Love is seeing past the surface to the person underneath, Hazel added. It is refusing to let fear or superstition or other people's opinions dictate your choices. It is being brave enough to hope, even when hope seems foolish. Thank you all for being here tonight, Zachary said. Thank you for accepting our family, for becoming our friends, for making White River a place we are proud to call home." "And thank you," Hazel said, looking directly at her husband, "to the cowboy who saw beauty where others saw a curse, who saw potential where others saw only tragedy, who saw me when I was invisible to everyone else. You changed my life, Zachary Owens. You saved my life." "You saved mine right back," Zachary said, and kissed her in front of the whole town, to applause and cheers and whistles. The party went late into the night, with music and dancing and laughter. Hazel danced with her husband, with her children, with friends old and new. She looked around the hall at all these people who had become part of her story, her life, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. As the evening wound down and people began heading home, Mrs. Chen, now in her 70s but still sharp as a tack, pulled Hazel aside. "I told you your luck had changed," she said with a satisfied smile. "I told you that first night." "You did," Hazel agreed. "You were right." "I am always right," Mrs. Chen said. "You remember that." Hazel hugged her tightly. "Thank you for everything, for being my friend and my family. I could not have done any of this without you." "Yes, you could have," Mrs. Chen said, "but I am glad you did not have to." That night, as Hazel and Zachary lay in bed in the house they had made a home, she said, "Do you remember that day by the creek when you asked me to marry you? You promised me we would have a long, happy life together." "I remember," Zachary said. "Are you going to tell me I was right?" "You were right," Hazel said, laughing. "We have had a long, happy life. 20 years of marriage, 3 wonderful children, a successful ranch, a place in the community. Everything I was too afraid to hope for. And we are not done yet," Zachary reminded her. "We have years ahead of us still, grandchildren to meet, new adventures to have, more happiness to find." "More happiness to create," Hazel corrected, "because that is what we do. We create our own happiness, our own future. We do not wait for it to happen to us." "When did you get so wise?" Zachary asked, pulling her closer. "When I married a man who believed in me," Hazel said. "When I decided to believe in myself, when I chose hope over fear." They fell asleep in each other's arms, and Hazel dreamed of the future, not with anxiety but with anticipation. She dreamed of watching her children grow and marry and have children of their own. She dreamed of growing old with Zachary, of sitting on the porch when they were gray and wrinkled, still holding hands and watching the sunset. She dreamed of a life well lived, full of love and purpose and joy. The years continued to unfold in the way that years do, with moments of challenge and triumph, sorrow and celebration. Marcus married a smart, capable woman named Sarah who loved ranching as much as he did. They gave Hazel and Zachary their first grandchild, a boy they named Zachary Jr., and eventually 2 more, a girl and another boy. Rose went off to normal school and came back with a teaching certificate and a quiet gentleman named James who adored her. They married and settled in White River, where Rose took over as the head teacher at the school Hazel and Zachary had helped build. Daniel took a job at a large horse ranch in Wyoming, where he met and married a ranch owner's daughter. They visited often, bringing their own children in time. Mrs. Chen passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 79, surrounded by the family she had helped raise. They buried her in the White River Cemetery with a headstone that read, "Beloved friend and family." Hazel grieved deeply for the woman who had been like a mother to her, but she also celebrated the long and well-lived life Mrs. Chen had had. As Hazel and Zachary entered their 50s, they began to slow down a bit, letting Marcus take on more of the ranch responsibilities. But they were far from inactive. Hazel continued her work with the library and the school, and she started a program to help new arrivals to White River, remembering her own difficult beginning. Zachary served on various committees and boards, using his experience and wisdom to help guide the town's development. They took a trip one year, just the two of them, traveling by train to San Francisco to see the ocean. It was the first time either of them had left Montana in years, and they marveled at the sights and sounds of the big city. But after 2 weeks, they were both ready to go home, to the ranch and the mountains and the life they had built. "I never thought I would say this," Hazel said as their train pulled into White River, "but I actually missed this place." "It is home," Zachary said simply. "It is where we belong," and it was. White River had transformed from the town that called her cursed to the place where she was most herself, most loved, most at home. The people who had once shunned her now greeted her warmly on the street. The children she had helped educate through her library and school programs grew up and had children of their own. The town grew and changed, but the Owens family remained at its heart, a constant reminder that love and courage could overcome anything. On Hazel's 60th birthday, the town organized a surprise celebration in her honor. When she walked into the church hall, expecting a small family dinner, she found it packed with people. A banner read, "Thank you, Hazel Owens, for 60 years of grace, strength, and love." The mayor gave a speech about all of Hazel's contributions to the community. Former students stood up to talk about how she had encouraged their love of reading. Young women she had mentored spoke about how she had helped them through difficult times. Even some visitors from neighboring towns came to pay their respects, people whose lives she had touched in ways she had not even realized. But the most moving moment came when Emma Crawford, now Emma Morrison and the mother of 4, stood to speak. 30 years ago, I arrived in White River broken and hopeless," she said, her voice strong and clear. "I had lost my husband and been driven from my home by people who called me cursed. I thought my life was over. And then Mrs. Hazel Owens found me. She told me her own story. She took me in. She showed me that I was not cursed, that I deserved love and happiness. She saved my life, quite literally. And I know I am not the only one she has helped over the years. Mrs. Owens, thank you. Thank you for your kindness, your wisdom, and your unwavering belief that people are more than their worst moments or their worst luck." Hazel could not stop crying. She looked around the room at all these people, this community she had become part of, and felt the weight of the journey she had taken. From the terrified widow arriving in White River with nothing, to this woman surrounded by love and respect and gratitude. It was more than she had ever dreamed possible. When it was her turn to speak, she stood beside Zachary as she had for so many important moments in her life. "I do not know what to say," she began. "I am overwhelmed and humbled by all of this. 60 years old. It seems impossible. I can still remember being 18 and thinking my life was ending with my first husband's death, and then 21 and alone again, and then 24 and arriving here, convinced I was cursed and would never know happiness. But I was wrong, so wrong." She looked at Zachary. "This man saw me when I was invisible. He believed in me when no one else would. He promised to prove the whole town wrong about me, and he kept that promise. But more than that, he loved me. He loved me through my fear and my doubt. He loved me when I could not love myself. He gave me a life I thought was impossible." She looked out at the crowd. "All of you, you gave me that life too. You gave me a second chance when I did not think I deserved one. You taught me that people can change, that opinions can shift, that redemption is real. You taught me that home is not just a place. It is people who see you and value you and stand by you. Thank you for being my home." The celebration continued late into the evening, but eventually, Hazel and Zachary made their way back to the ranch. They stood on the porch where they had stood so many times before, looking out at the land they had worked and loved for decades. "60 years old," Hazel mused. "Do you remember when we first met? I was 24. You were 26. We were so young." "We had no idea what we were doing," Zachary agreed with a laugh. "Building a life, raising children, running a ranch. We just figured it out as we went." "And we did a pretty good job," Hazel said. "Look at what we built, Zachary. Not just the ranch, but the family, the legacy, the impact we have had on people's lives. It is more than I ever thought I could have." "It is exactly what you deserved," Zachary said, turning to face her. "You are the strongest, bravest, most incredible woman I have ever known. You survived things that would have broken most people. You kept going when you had every reason to give up. You chose hope when fear would have been easier. I am so proud of you, Hazel. I am so proud to have been your husband for all these years." "I am proud of us," Hazel said. "We made this life together." They stood there in the darkness, holding each other, and Hazel thought about everything that had brought them to this moment. The pain and the joy, the struggle and the triumph, the fear and the love. All of it had been necessary, had shaped who she was and who they were together. She would not change any of it, even the hard parts, because it had all led here. The years that followed were golden. Hazel and Zachary watched their grandchildren grow, welcoming new additions to the family with each passing year. They celebrated births and weddings and anniversaries. They traveled a bit more, taking train trips to visit family and see new places, but they always came home to the ranch. Zachary's health began to decline when he was in his early 70s. Nothing dramatic, just the slow wearing down of a body that had worked hard for decades. He moved a bit slower, tired more easily, needed to rest more often. But his mind stayed sharp, and his love for Hazel never wavered. One evening, as they sat on the porch in their usual spots, Zachary said, "I need you to know something." Hazel looked at him, her heart clenching. "What is it?" "I am not going to live forever," he said matter-of-factly. "I know that, and you know that. And when my time comes, I need you to understand that it has nothing to do with any curse or bad luck or anything like that. It will just be my time. And I will have had the most wonderful, blessed, incredible life. I will have had you and our children and this ranch and everything I ever wanted. So when it happens, I do not want you to think, even for a second, that you caused it or that you are cursed. Do you understand me?" Tears streamed down Hazel's face. "I do not want to lose you. I know, sweetheart, I do not want to leave you, but I need to know that you will be okay. That you will remember everything we have talked about over the years. That you will keep living and loving and being the amazing woman you are." "I will try," Hazel said. "I cannot promise I will not be sad because I will be devastated. But I will try to remember that loving you was the greatest blessing of my life, not a curse." "That is all I ask," Zachary said, pulling her close. Zachary lived for 5 more years after that conversation, 5 good years full of family and laughter and quiet contentment. He passed away peacefully in his sleep one winter night, with Hazel beside him holding his hand. He was 76 years old, and they had been married for 50 years. The grief was immense. Hazel mourned deeply and truly, crying for the loss of her partner, her best friend, the love of her life. But she did not despair. She did not fall into the darkness that had consumed her after her earlier losses, because she knew with absolute certainty that Zachary's death was not her fault. It was not a curse. It was simply the natural end of a long and well-lived life. The funeral was attended by what seemed like everyone in Montana. Zachary had been respected and loved, and people came from all over to pay their respects. Marcus gave a eulogy that was both heartbreaking and uplifting, talking about his father's legacy of kindness, hard work, and love. Rose read a poem she had written about how her father had shown her what a good man looked like. Daniel spoke about the lessons his father had taught him about horses and life, and being true to yourself. And Hazel, standing at the end, said simply, 50 years ago, a cowboy saw beauty where others saw a curse. He promised to prove them all wrong, and he kept that promise every single day of our life together. He showed me what love looks like, what home feels like, what hope can do. I will miss him every day for the rest of my life, but I will not regret a single moment we had together. Thank you, Zachary, for everything. You were my greatest adventure, my deepest love, my happiest ending. After the funeral, Emma Morrison pulled Hazel aside. She was in her 50s now, with gray threading through her hair, but her eyes were kind and knowing. "How are you really?" she asked. "Sad," Hazel said honestly. "So sad, but not destroyed, not broken, because Zachary gave me something I did not have after my other husbands died. He gave me the certainty that I am not cursed, that death is just part of life, that loving someone is worth the pain of losing them." "He was a good man," Emma said. "The best," Hazel agreed. In the months and years that followed, Hazel rebuilt her life once again. But this time was different from the other times she had been widowed. This time, she was not alone. She had her children and grandchildren surrounding her with love and support. She had a community that valued her and friends who checked on her regularly. She had a lifetime of memories and a legacy she was proud of. She continued to work with the library and the school. She mentored young women in the community, sharing her story and her wisdom. She spent time with her grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandfather and the ranch and the history of their family. She stayed active and engaged with life, refusing to retreat into grief or isolation. On what would have been her and Zachary's 60th wedding anniversary, Hazel took a trip out to the hillside where Zachary had brought her so many years ago. The place where he had shown her everything they had built and told her she was blessed, not cursed. She stood there alone, looking out at the valley, at the ranch now run by Marcus and Sarah, at the town of White River in the distance, at the mountains she had come to love so much. "We did it," she said aloud, as if Zachary could hear her. "We proved them all wrong. We had the long, happy life you promised me. We built something beautiful and lasting. And I am not cursed, Zachary. I never was. I was just a woman who had to learn to hope again, to love again, to believe in herself again. And you taught me how to do all of that. Thank you, my love. Thank you for everything." The wind picked up, rustling through the grass, and for a moment Hazel could almost feel Zachary beside her, his presence as real as it had been when he was alive. She smiled through her tears and whispered, "I love you. I will always love you, but I am going to be okay." "You made sure of that." Hazel lived for another decade after Zachary's death, passing away peacefully at the age of 87. She was surrounded by her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren when she went, her hand held by Marcus, who had grown into a man so much like his father it sometimes took Hazel's breath away. The funeral was as large as Zachary's had been. The entire town closed down for the day to honor the woman who had come to them cursed and frightened so many years ago and had transformed into one of their most beloved and respected citizens. They told stories about her kindness, her strength, her wisdom, her impact on countless lives. But perhaps the most fitting tribute came in the form of a historical marker that the town erected in the center of White River. It read, "In memory of Hazel Thompson Owens, 1857–1944. She arrived in our town called Cursed, but she proved that love, courage, and determination are stronger than any superstition. She built a life of purpose and joy, touched countless hearts, and showed us all what true strength looks like. White River is a better place because she chose to call it home." And beneath that, in smaller letters, it said, "In memory of Zachary Owens, 1855–1931. The cowboy who saw beauty where others saw a curse, and who kept his promise to prove them all wrong. Together they showed us what love can do. The legacy of Hazel and Zachary Owens lived on through their children and grandchildren, through the ranch that continued to thrive, through the library and school they had helped build, through the countless lives they had touched. Their story became part of White River's history, told to new generations as a reminder that people are more than their circumstances, that love can overcome fear, and that curses only have the power we give them. Years later, when Marcus was an old man himself, he would tell his great-grandchildren about their great-great-grandmother Hazel and great-great-grandfather Zachary. He would tell them about how she came to Montana with nothing but fear and determination, about how his father had seen past the rumors to the wonderful person underneath, about how they had built a beautiful life together, despite everyone saying it was impossible. The town called her cursed, he would say, his voice strong even in old age. But your great-great-grandfather saw her beauty and promised to prove them all wrong, and he did. They both did. They taught us that we write our own stories, that we decide what we believe about ourselves, that love is always, always worth the risk. Remember that, children. No matter what life throws at you, no matter what other people say about you, you have the power to choose hope. You have the power to build something beautiful, just like they did. And in that way, the story of Hazel and Zachary, the cursed widow and the cowboy who loved her anyway, continued to inspire and guide long after they were gone. Their love story became legend, their courage became legacy, and their lives became proof that sometimes the best way to break a curse is simply to refuse to believe in it. In the end, that was the truth Hazel had learned and lived by for more than 60 years. She was not cursed. She had never been cursed. She had simply been a woman who had suffered great loss and found the courage to hope again, to love again, to build again. And with Zachary beside her, believing in her and loving her every step of the way, she had created a life more beautiful than she had ever dared to dream. That was the real magic, the real happy ending. Not the absence of pain or challenge or loss, but the presence of love strong enough to weather anything. Love that saw past surfaces to the truth underneath. Love that kept promises even when they seemed impossible. Love that proved, day after day after day, that curses were just stories, and the real story was about two people who chose each other and built something that would last long after they were gone. And in White River, Montana, at a ranch in the valley beneath the mountains, that love lived on.